Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 21st of October of 2024. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, we have a lot of changes on the ground, so let's start. But before we start discussing the situation along the line of combat contact, I would like to discuss with you several political events. First of all, today we have report that the United States Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin arrived in Kiev, and today he had a meeting with Zelensky himself, and obviously he brought Zelensky some message. We have the video of how he was arriving. As you can see, the Ukrainians still don't have possibilities to use planes, and it seems that Lloyd Austin for the first time in his life was traveling using the trains. Anyway, according to information we have, the head of Pentagon didn't brought Ukrainians the authorization or permission to attack deep inside the territory of Russia. At least this is the unofficial position of the Pentagon, but some sources are saying that this is exactly the purpose why Lloyd Austin arrived in Ukraine. He brought the authorization and permission for Ukrainians to attack deep inside of Russia. So of course the question is why does it happen today? And the thing is that tomorrow on the territory of Russia, the Russians are planning to conduct the BRICS summit. So there was a very interesting article published by The Economist, Putin's plan to fight the dollar. He hopes this week's BRICS summit will spark a major bang in the fight against sanctions. The rapidly growing BRICS group is challenging the dominance of the Western-led order. At a summit this week, Putin hopes to create a new global financial system that will shield Russia and its allies from sanctions and US dominance. So as for this situation, of course, for the Western countries, for the European countries, for the NATO countries, it's the best time, the best way to make another attack on Russia, to attack once again Russian reputation and to humiliate Putin personally. So I believe that yes, Lloyd Austin arrived in Kiev with authorization to Ukraine to attack Russia tomorrow. Of course, Ukraine is not going to attack Ryazan, the place where the Russians are planning to conduct and to have this BRICS summit. The Ukrainians will attack other important objects, but very close to the place where the Russians are planning to conduct summit. And let's see, of course, what is going to be next, but this might become the next page of the special military operation, the beginning of another page. Now let's return back to the line of combat contact, and let's begin with the South Donetsk direction, where the Russians continue their offensive operation. Today we have a lot of data from the line between Bogoyavlenka and Ugledar, including some geolocations like this one. And in this video we can see the Russian stormtroopers that were clearing trenches. As you can see, several 5-6 Russian assault troopers were attacking Ukrainian positions. During this video we will not be able to see even if a single Ukrainian soldier. Maybe these positions were already abandoned by the Ukrainians by the time the Russians were clearing the territory. Anyway, the place was geolocated exactly in this point, and based on this video most of the mappers have adjusted their maps in Russian favor. As you can see, the significant territories were colored in Russian favor, including the facilities, South Donbas #1 mine facilities like this one. As for the Bogoyavlenka itself, according to different pro-Russian sources, the Russians during the previous 24 hours managed to improve their positions and to take under control the tree lines and to get as close as possible to the village of Bogoyavlenka itself. From this direction we received a significant number of videos of how the Russians were FPV droning the Ukrainian vehicles. As you can see on the first seconds of the video, the significant number of already destroyed and abandoned vehicles along the main supply roads, and the Russians were continue attacking and hunting the Ukrainian machines and different vehicles and personal carriers. So some certain level of FPV drone control was established by the Russians, and the Russians continue dealing the significant damage to the Ukrainians. Now let's move further and let's talk about the village of Katerinovka. And during the previous 24 hours we received lots of geolocations that confirm additional progress on the ground. This video was published by the 214 separate battalion AFOR, and in this video we can see how the Ukrainians were fighting with the Russians in the southern outskirts of Katerinovka and in the vicinity along the main road between Katerinovka itself and the village of Antonovka. So there are lots of episodes. We are not going to watch the video till the end, but two of the episodes were geolocated. And the first one was geolocated exactly in this building. The Ukrainians were FPV droning the Russians, and another episode was geolocated in this point. The Russian Russian convoy was moving along the river Solomenka, and the Ukrainian grenade launcher attacked the Russian vehicle exactly in this point. Based on these two geolocations, we have adjusted the map in Russian favor. I'll remind you that according to the post of the 79th Air Assault Brigade, the Russians left the village of the Ukrainians left the village of Katerinovka a few days ago. Yet we haven't received anything that can confirm complete control over the settlement by the Russians, but most likely this is exactly the reality. Most likely the Russians have already captured Katerinovka probably a day ago, but we are just receiving one video after another during the next few days. The process will be stretched in time. Furthermore, we have additional Russian attack between the village of Konstantinovka and Pobeda. Also, the video was published by the 79th Air Assault Brigade of the Armored Forces of Ukraine, and in this video we can see the significant number of Russian total tanks that were attacking the Ukrainian positions along the road between the village of Pobeda and the village of Konstantinovka. We're talking about this dense network of the fortifications, and this network was captured by the Russians. So as you can see, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians conducted 3 attacks. The first one on the line between Uglidar, Vadiana and Bogoyavlenka itself. The second attack took place in the vicinity and around and inside of the village by the name of Katerinovka. And the third attack, the Russians were moving from the village of Paraskoyevka in the direction of the village of Antonovka from the northeastern side. So, and as you can see, every single attack brought the Russians additional progress and results. Now let's move further and let's talk about the village of the town of Kurakhove. We have additional changes on the ground that were published by the Russian sources. Most of the mappers have adjusted their maps based on this video, and in this video we can see a Russian soldier that was waving the flag in the most eastern part of the town of Kurakhove, exactly on the let's say outskirts, on the back door of this building. The video was geolocated and the place, the map was adjusted. This is the situation on the ground on the 20th of October, and these are the changes on the ground on the 21st of October. The Russians took under control the eastern outskirts of Kurakhove, and the Russians, as you can see, managed to improve their positions along N15 road, at least according to different mappers. This information was provided us by neutral mappers. Now let's talk about Kurakhove-Gornyak agglomeration. The situation is very critical for the Ukrainians, and if you follow different sources, different mappers, different military experts, every single person who describe and talk about the situation in Kurakhove-Gornyak came to the same conclusion, and everybody currently are saying that the defense of Ukrainian forces in this area was broken by the Russians. Defense has collapsed, and now the Ukrainians are about to begin very big, huge running in the western direction. Let's discuss in details. First, we have the video that was published from the village of Zaryana. This is a very important video. Based on this video, just today, most of the mappers have adjusted their maps. We have adjusted our map a few days ago based on the report of the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation. The Russians reported that the village was captured 2 or 3 days ago, and just now we have real video that confirms this Russian additional progress. In this video we can see several episodes of how the Russians were moving from one building to another, how the Russians were clearing the constructions, how the Russians were searching for the Ukrainians, and in the final part of the video we can see 2 Russian soldiers that were raising the flag right on the central part of the village by the name of Zaryana. So this place was geolocated, and this is exactly the area, this is exactly the Zelena street where the Russians raised the Russian flag. Based on this video, most of the mappers have adjusted the map. We have adjusted the map a few days ago. Also, we have very powerful Russian offensive operation from the northern direction. The Russians managed to improve their positions in the northern part of the village of the town by the name of Gornyak, and the most important, the Russians took under control the company stronghold between the villages of Zhelana Pershe, Zhelana Druge, and Gornyak itself. We're talking about this dense network of the fortifications. This information was provided us by pro-Ukrainian mappers. As for the neutral mappers, the Russians managed to improve their positions even more and to get as close as possible to the most eastern outskirts of Gornyak. As for Gornyak itself, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians were bombing this territory heavily with the use of not just aviation bombs or artillery. The Russians were bombing the territory with the Toslin tower systems, which means that the Russians managed to get very close to the central part of the settlement, and of course regular artillery strikes as usually. Now let's compare the changes on map. This is the situation on the ground on the 21st of October. This is the situation on the at the end of the 20th of October. So significant progress, and currently the Russians control around 20% of Gornyak itself. As for Kurakhovka, the Russians were bombing the central part of the settlement, trying to pin down the Ukrainians and not allow the Ukrainian military authorities to redeploy additional forces and reinforcements in the northern direction. So the Russians were bombing the main logistic roads. Very interesting video is coming from the from Tsukurina landfill from this territory, and now there are a lot of talks about this picture, because in this picture you can see the landfill between Tsukurina itself and the town of Gornyak. And in this landfill, as you can see, the Russians or the Koreans, nobody knows for sure, raised two flags: the flag of Russian Federation and the flag of Korea, of the Northern Korea. And now we have lots of talks, lots of speculations whether this is just a regular photo shoot, or it's something like a Russian joke, or it's just a regular trolling from the Russian side, or maybe the Korean forces were involved in this operation and they took part in attacking on Ukrainian positions in Tsukurina Gornyak agglomeration. Very interesting. We're waiting for additional clarifications, because if this information is correct, if North Korean forces were involved in attack towards Novoselidovka and Izmailovka, then of course this is already the break of international law, and based just on this photo, the North Korea can be considered as the aggressor in the war with Ukraine, and this can lead to unpredictable consequences for every single side of the conflict. Now let's move further and let's talk about the city of Selydove. The Russians continue improving their positions on the flanks. The most important is that neutral mappers, after probably 5 days of publications of this type of information in a row by the Russian sources, finally the neutral mappers updated their maps in Russian favor along the railways. And according to neutral mappers, the Russians, as a result of offensive, managed to improve their positions along the railways and to enter the outskirts of this southeastern outskirts of the village of Vishnyovo. And the most important, that this information we received somewhere at 1 a.m. of the 21st of October. So it's already 20 hours before you start watching this video. So very far from the current situation, which means that most likely during the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to improve their positions even further. And maybe the village of Vishnyovo was already captured by the time you watched the video. This is very important because 2 of 3 supply roads were cut by the Russians, not just by artillery or rifle fire, but physically. In the northeastern direction, we have additional changes on the ground. We have video that was published by pro-Ukrainian sources, and in this video we can see several FPV drone attacks on Russian positions in this part of the city, and this video confirms that the Russians managed to take under control not just the northeastern part of Selydove, but the Russians managed to take under complete control the landfill and the mine of Karachenka. So let's compare the changes on the ground. This is the situation on the 20th of October. This is the situation, for example, on the 19th of October. Once again, 20th of October, and this is on the 21st of October. Significant progress, and the Russians are moving very fast. Furthermore, we have additional changes on the ground according to pro-Russian resources. Let's take a look at changes. This is the situation on the end of the 20th, and this is at the beginning of the 21st. The Russians improved their positions along this true line that goes right in front of the main road M30 that connects the city of Selydove with the city of Pokrovsk. Once again, if the Russians are able to cut the road M30 physically, this is going to be the end game for the city of Selydove, and the significant number of Ukrainians would be encircled by the Russians. I don't think that the Russians have problems to cut this road. Probably the Russians are trying to find a solution how to capture as many as possible Ukrainian soldiers, how to make this operation clear, and how to make this operation basically perfect with the less losses from the Russian side and with a significant number of prisoners of war from the Ukrainian side. So let's wait for additional updates, because not even days but the next hours are decisive for the Ukrainians in Selydove. Either they will abandon Selydove today, this upcoming night, or they might be captured in Cauldron and stay there forever. Now let's move further and let's talk about Novogrodovka. We have some geolocations from the main supply roads between the city of Mirnograd and the mine of Novogrodovka III, and as you can see, the Russians established complete FPV drone control. This video confirms that the Russians are about to begin the full-scale offensive operation with the purpose to cut this artillery pocket and to take under control everything that located below this red line. Now let's move further. As for the Toretsk agglomeration, during the previous 24 hours we haven't received anything special, just one video, but very important video. And in this video, we can see how the Russian drone was trying to get Ukrainian vehicle that was running away from the city of Toretsk in the direction of Konstantinovka. And we see that the Russians most likely didn't manage to get, but at the same time, another car started moving right in ahead of Russians, and this car was attacked by Russian FPV drone. The video is very important because this video confirms that now the Russians have no problems to send their FPV drones as deep as possible behind the Ukrainian defense belt in the city of Toretsk, and basically the main road between Konstantinovka and the northern part of Toretsk, TO516, was already cut by the Russian FPV drone operators, which means the beginning of the operational encirclement, of the creation of the operational encirclement of the Ukrainians in the city of Toretsk. So the battle for this agglomeration is also coming to an end. And now let's move further. We have some updates from the city of Chasiv Yar. There are very heavy clashes. The Russians are bombing the settlement with a significant number of aviation bombs. The Russians are preparing the foothold before the final attack, which most likely is going to take place along the main road N32 between the villages of Ivanovska, Stupochki and the city of Konstantinovka. The Russians first most likely will try to attack in this direction with the purpose to take under control this territory. This will allow the Russians to cut the main supply roads and to establish fire control over the support that goes to the city of Chasiv Yar and in the southern directions towards the Alexandra, Shultina, Bilogora, so to these fields. Now let's move further. As for the Sivers direction, we haven't received anything special during the previous day, just a regular activity. Southern Kupiansk direction, we have some changes on the ground. Today we got the video of how the Russians were attacking towards the village of Zherebets and how the forces of 66th Mechanized Brigade of the Armored Forces of Ukraine were trying to repel Russian attacks, and most likely they managed to do. At least in this video we can see several vehicles that were damaged and destroyed by the Ukrainians. But anyway, this video confirms additional progress. This is the situation on the ground on the 20th of October, and this is the situation on the ground on the 21st. As you can see, we have adjusted the contested area in Russian favor, and we have added additional territory under complete Russian control. So let's wait and see what is going to be next. We continue receiving a lot of updates from the village of Kopanki and Pershatravnya. So now the Ukrainians call the village of Stepy. There are very heavy clashes, and we've increased the numbers of this since the beginning of the month. We will see that we have a very huge focus of Russian forces. Since the beginning of month, the Russians were bombing and attacking this territory heavily with the use of FAPs and flamethrower systems. As you can see, we have a lot of videos, and also the Russians are saying that as a result of another attack they managed to destroy the headquarters and to destroy the medical unit of the 3rd Tank Brigade of the Armored Forces of Ukraine. So one of these strikes led to these casualties among the Ukrainian medicine personnel. In this video we can see a few more strikes. So after this focus, after all these attacks, the Russians launched an offensive, and today we have report that the Russians managed to dig in deeper in the most northern part of the settlement, and they're continuing. So this is very important operation, because based on this operation, based on the results of this operation, we will be able to understand where the Russians are going to move further. As for the Askil, the battle for the river of Askil, we have changes on the ground according to pro-Russian sources. The Russians are saying that during the previous 24 hours the Russians managed to take under control and to secure the southern part of the village of Kolesnikovka. Now the Russian positions has foothold in the southern part of Kolesnikovka and in the northern part of Kruglakovka. Significant progress on the ground for the previous few days. For example, this is the situation at before the beginning of the Russian biggest attack in this direction. It's the situation on the 17th of October. On the 18th of October, the Russians answered the first streets of the Kruglakovka itself. On the 19th of October, the Russians conducted several counterattacks and forced the Russians to fall back. On the 20th of October, the Russians managed to restore control over their lost positions, and on the 21st of October, the Russians improved their positions significantly. Basically, they increased their foothold in 2 times. And of course, the Russians are moving further. Now let's move further. Let's talk about the Kharkiv direction, and based on the number of geolocations, everything is clear as you can see. The main focus are taking place of Russian activity is taking place in the eastern and northeastern direction of the Sudzha Ukrainian offensive operation. Just several icons from the western part, and let's discuss them. The pro-Ukrainian mappers reported that Ukrainians abandoned their positions in Olgovka completely, and the village was secured by the Russians. Let's wait for some geolocations. We will adjust, of course, the map in Russian favor, and we see the significant number of artillery aviation strikes exactly in the eastern part. The concentration of these icons tell us just one thing, that the Russians are about to begin their full-scale offensive operation in this direction as well. As for some changes on the ground, today we got report that the Russians managed to take under control the village of Kalmakov. At least that was stated by pro-Russian resources. So these are the changes on the ground in comparison between the 20th and the 21st of October. So the Russians are pushing and the Ukrainians are suffering significant losses, as you can see. The next few days we're going to receive a lot of updates from the BRICS summit, and we'll see how the Russians are planning to fight dollar. And most likely during this summit, the Ukrainians will attack the territory deep inside the territory of Russia with the use of long-range missiles of UK and US productions. And this is going to be very interesting. And that's it for today. Military Summary Channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.